taking a look at structure on the daily. The reason why I'm not getting super excited about this small recovery yet, the daily paints a very clear picture on the bearish leg that we are currently operating in.
But if you zoom out a little bit further and say, okay, over 2026, do we really think crypto ETFs are only going to be 1 or 2% of the total ETF market? No chance. And so that, again, it's one of those macro tailwinds where Ripple sits in a position where we see, particularly from our Ripple Prime, the prime brokerage business, we see a lot of interesting activity where institutions that have been on the sidelines, maybe because of regulatory clarity, maybe because of risk aversion, for whatever reasons they've been on the sidelines, they're getting involved. And they're starting small, and they're going to walk, then they're going to crawl, then they're going to walk, then they're going to run. And I think it's going to create a lot of tailwind.
So this moment in the market hasn't necessarily spooked institutional capital. That's what you're saying?
Definitely not.
Okay.
Alrighty, everybody, what is going on? Welcome back to another CYPRX video breakdown. As you all heard, Brad Garlinghouse, regulatory clarity is coming. Institutions will start to scale in slowly but surely over time, and that this recent market drawdown and pullback did not push institutional interest in the digital asset space away. In today's video breakdown, we're going to be giving a technical analysis update on XRP, as we have been one of the only communities on the face of the internet giving you guys accurate updates. We're going to take a look at our institutional software, go over some price levels to be paying attention to the up and downside. And then I also want to cap on what Brad Garlinghouse said about regulatory clarity and give you guys an institutional perspective from people with valid credentials from Ripple Swell that took place just in November 2025, so that way you guys can kind of get a gist on how we are running out of time. Regulatory clarity is coming faster and a lot sooner than most people realize. And in my personal opinion, you don't want to get into these markets after the institutions. Remember that now we as retail traders have the upper hand on these institutions to front run these large institutional investors before they flood in with massive amounts of capital. Not financial advice, always do your own personal research, but so many people, in my personal opinion, are going to miss out on a life-changing opportunity for generational wealth. So let's dive in, keeping you guys in the loop accurately, not driving any hopium or hype, and just diving into our institutional software. Let's do that first. So if we come back to the last video breakdown and the update for the end of the year 2025 that we gave you guys, we had mentioned that the next hurdle that we would need to overcome on XRP was $1.94, and that would send us straight up into the institutional sell wall of around $2.03 to $2.04 before we started to see some sell pressure. Take a second here and listen, just so that way you guys can see that we've been accurately tracking these things for you guys publicly. Next level above that is this aggressive seller that existed at $2.04 that trapped this buyer here, broke this previous support, was retested, trapped another buyer, threw up a passive defensive wall, and pushed price to the downside. And that level comes in at $2.04. So just so that way you guys can see the level of accuracy, so that way heading into 2026, you guys can really start to consider joining a private community that has built over the past 4 years institutional software that is the most accurate software to give accurate and updated levels on trading pairs like XRP, Bitcoin, Hedera, HBAR, Solana, Ethereum, so on and so forth. And we give these updates to our private community members and access to this software inside the private CYPRX Discord. So let's just pause right there. Let's take a look at the current updated technical analysis. Let me stop sharing this screen and let's go over to our institutional order flow. So first, on the right-hand side, we have the 4-hour time frame. Let's take a look at that first before we go over to the daily. So in that previous end-of-year update that I delivered for you guys just the other day, before the year ended, keeping you guys in the loop with what could really happen on XRP's price action, we had mentioned that if we broke above $1.93 to $1.94, i.e. this yellow level here, that we would likely see some sell pressure or price stall out at roughly around $2.03 to $2.04. You guys can now see how accurate this software is. Price came up straight into that $2.04 range where we started to see some profit taking. We started to see some sellers defend their previous positions at this sell wall where we had this aggressive seller. And now we are currently in limbo waiting to see what happens next. So just real fast to give you guys some updated levels to be paying attention to, the next hurdle, if we were to break above $2.04, comes in on XRP at roughly around $2.11, where on the 4-hour time frame, we can clearly see that a support was broken here. Let me zoom in for you guys. We can clearly see that there was a support broken here with an aggressive seller. Buyers tried to make an attempt to defend. However, they were trapped inside this bearish candlestick. You can see that green buy volume trapped inside this bearish candlestick, followed through with a sell wall that was retested. Buyers were trapped by passive sellers. Sellers became aggressive and started to make their way back to the downside, leading to another break in support. So the next area of interest for buyers to overcome comes in directly on the 4-hour time frame at roughly around $2.11. If we can break above $2.11, then I will start to get excited for a full-blown recovery to roughly around $2.28, or the institutional dark pool that has held price suppressed below on XRP for quite some time, since all the way back in November. All right. So to the upside, if we can break, have a sustainable hold above $2.04 to solidify that, $2.11 will be the next area of interest. Above $2.11, $2.28 is next on our radar. In the future, if we can break above $2.28, then I will start to get excited. I'll take you guys over to the daily time frame here in just a second. All right. The daily chart will also give us our downside targets and areas of interest. All right. So now you guys have what to look out for on the 4-hour time frame. And you guys have seen in previous video breakdowns, if you've been paying attention to our updates, how accurate this software can be. Literally to the absolute T of a degree, $2.04, which we highlighted in our previous video breakdown, has materialized and come into fruition. Now, taking a look at structure on the daily, the reason why I'm not getting super excited about this small recovery yet, the daily paints a very clear picture on the bearish leg that we are currently operating in. And so you guys can see here at the top of this bearish leg, interestingly enough, comes in at around that $2.27 threshold that we had highlighted, where there is an institutional dark pool resting. And so right now on the daily time frame, zooming in here for you guys, you can clearly see that the last bearish leg in which we are operating in on XRP is this down move from A down to B. And so until we break all of the aggressive sellers and the passive sellers that exist in this bearish leg, with aggressive bullish activity, constantly seeing buyers trap sellers, follow through with support walls, pushing through with aggression, and breaking higher, I'm not getting overly optimistic on XRP. So what do I mean by that? Just taking a look, utilizing the tools. Ideally, we would need to see XRP engulf all of this previous bearish price action, which has led us into this A to B or most recent down leg. Continuing with the overall bearish structure, you can see a high, lower low, lower high, lower low, lower high, lower low formation. This is now the most recent bearish leg in which we are operating in. So ideally, we would like to see price turn this recent sell wall at roughly around $2.04 into support, trap sellers. Buyers then become aggressive enough to push through that $2.11 threshold that we mentioned on the 4-hour time frame, and eventually gain enough momentum to engulf this entire bearish leg and break back above $2.28. If we can see something like this on XRP, that would be the first time on the daily time frame since pretty much all the way back. Let's go take a look. All the way back in October of last year. And for the first time ever, we have seen sell walls engulfed and trapped by buyers, where even on the daily time frame, you can constantly see that every single time buyers try to throw up a support, sellers engulf them with overarching sell momentum and volume. They throw up sell walls and they internally trap buyers, continuing to push price lower and lower. And so remember how I mentioned in previous video breakdowns, we would need to see all of these sell walls trapped internally in price and see the buy walls, just like how externally the sell walls exist in XRP's price right now. We would like to see the buy walls support XRP's price, flip externally, and see the sell volume get trapped internally. And we have yet to see that. Where we would first see that on the daily is if we saw a break higher than $2.28, engulfing this entire bearish leg. To the downside, if we do not break higher than the $2.28 threshold, I would look at that as an area of caution. If we start to see sellers become passive, trap buyers at highs, follow through with aggression, and push price back to the downside, followed with a risk off sentiment. Our first targets and areas of interest on the daily for possible dollar cost average levels on XRP would be a revisitation of the $1.89 to $1.84 range. Anything below that opens the door for $1.72 to $1.69. And in previous video breakdowns, we have mentioned to you guys in a worst case scenario or mass liquidation event that unfolds in 2026, the lowest level deltas that pop up on our radar come in at around 77 cents. Now, same thing over on the 4-hour time frame. I just want to kind of reiterate what we would need to see on the daily because we're starting to see it on the 4-hour time frame. So again, pay attention to how these buy walls or all of these buyers that constantly try to become aggressive and push price higher get trapped by sellers. Sellers engulf the buyers, trap them at highs, become aggressive, and then buy volume gets trapped internally in price, all here in this area. And you can see that the sell volume is what supersedes price action and has maintained control of the overall price action recently on XRP. Well, for the first time, literally, I'm not even exaggerating. Let's just zoom out real fast and take a look. For the first time since roughly all the way back in, we'll go back to August of 2025, you can see was the first time that we see buy walls trapped inside of price action and engulfed by sellers. For the first time since that date, we are just now starting to see buyers flip externally on XRP's price, where on the 4-hour time frame, sellers have finally been engulfed and trapped internally inside of price, and the buy walls are just now starting to engulf price externally and help support its momentum. So we would ideally like to see this type of price action on the daily, where the sell walls get engulfed, buy walls flip externally on price and support XRP's price, taking it into higher levels that I mentioned. So hopefully that gives you guys a visual perspective on all of the sell pressure that still exists on XRP before you guys see the hopium and the price predictions that start to fluctuate on XRP in 2026. Hopefully we've been able to keep you guys level-headed and accurately in the loop with what to pay attention to on XRP's price. You guys now have both upside and downside targets to be mindful of as we head into the new year throughout the remaining portions of 2026. Once or twice a week, I will make sure to revisit these updates for you guys once the levels are achieved that we're paying attention to. If you guys want daily accurate analysis on XRP, don't forget that you guys can always lock in with us inside the private CYPRX Discord, where our institutional scalper is constantly giving accurate updates utilizing our software for our private community members on a daily basis. Every single day during New York session, he's constantly giving screenshots and breaking down the analysis on XRP to keep our private community members in the loop. And he's not just doing this on XRP, he's doing this on a multitude of different currency pairs: XLM, Bitcoin, XDC, Quant, Ethereum, so on and so forth. The list goes on. We'd love to have you on the team. Tap in with us in 2026. Especially if you guys are over all the hopium and the hype that constantly fluctuates inside the crypto ecosystem. Now, with that in mind, let's jump back onto the topic of Brad Garlinghouse and what he mentioned on how regulatory clarity is coming. I just want to give you guys an idea behind when this could all possibly take place from an institutional perspective, i.e., people with valid credentials in this space that have talked about when they believe regulatory clarity is finally going to be implemented. And so first, I just want to take you guys down. This is the Ripple Swell video catalog that has fully dropped from all of the Ripple Swell panel discussions that took place in November 2025. So first, I want to click on this session here titled Maturity in Digital Asset Adoption. Let's listen to this individual speak where they go on to talk about how it's going to be at least a year before full regulatory clarity. Now, again, we know that institutions are not going to fully adopt these digital assets into their balance sheets and in their portfolios until full regulatory clarity is implemented. So remember, Ripple Swell took place in November 2025. You guys can see that here. And so if we consider what this individual is saying, that regulatory clarity is not going to be fully implemented for a year from now, they said that in November 2025, which puts us in October, November timeframe 2026 before full regulatory clarity is actually implemented and applied.
The promise of tokenization, you're almost trying to look at maybe potentially going back to types of bearer assets and what are the risk profile associated with having bearer assets and how does the investor get protected in that scenario. So those are some of the themes that I think are still yet to be figured out. It's not going to be in the next 6 months. We're looking for market infrastructure legislation, hopefully in the next 12 months or so. And then there will be another sort of 12 months after that for the actual regulatory agencies to implement those rules and clarify different things that might not be fully applicable to DeFi.
So this gentleman here, again, in November of last year, 2025, mentioned that in the next 12 months or so, we could see full-blown regulatory clarity. And then 12 months after that, the banks and institutions have a implementation phase where they can apply the regulatory clarity that we have received. And so hopefully that puts things into a realistic perspective for you guys. We understand as mature digital asset investors from the retail spectrum that these large institutions have regulatory requirements and guidelines that they must follow restrictively in order to onboard into this digital asset space. Well, if an individual with valid credentials talking at Ripple Swell is actively saying that this is going to take at least a minimum of a year to maybe 2 years from where they were sitting at in November 2025. Hopefully, when you guys see these bullish Moonboy hypey projection targets, you understand that none of that is happening without full-blown regulatory clarity. And so this gives you guys an insight and a realistic time frame as to how that could all unfold. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that his timeline is or is not correct. But again, keeping you guys level-headed and not inflating your expectations. If it were to take another 2 years, which I hope it doesn't, pray to God it doesn't, XRP is my biggest bag, right? Could you wait that long? Do you have the mental stability to push through all the hopium and the hype that we're going to see between now and then, giving you guys a realistic expectation? Now, he's not the only person that said this. If we come back over here to institutional custody and tokenization with financial institutions in this session, there is another individual that stated almost the exact same thing.
Not only do we get regulatory approval here in the US, every branch we've launched. Yep. So HKMA, MSA, FCA, we get approval from all the jurisdictions. And like, this is an internal solution, right? This is only for KYC, AML, BSA, city approved clients. And we've still taken that approach because the language wasn't clear out there. So that's not going to change, as we start to, yes, everyone's like, well, Genius passed, but our regulators still have years to opine on this. Mm-hmm. But, our regulators still have years to opine on this. Mm-hmm. And our tokens, big outstanding question for us, are tokens going to be treated like cash? When cash comes into the bank, we do all the checks and balances. But because of this technology, you can see 5, 10, 15 hops ago. If it was used in a sanctioned country or for illicit behavior, what does that mean for our clients, but also for us? So I think for true adoption and scalability, we need that regulatory clarity. Sure. Because like from a technical standpoint, like City Token Service is an ERC20 token. Mm-hmm. There's no reason from a technical standpoint. It's more from the regulatory approval and also, the safety and soundness that we can ensure. Like we're not going to go into something unless we can ensure that the safeguard of our clients' assets.
Absolutely.
Now, that industry-leading expert sitting next to an individual from Franklin Templeton and Fidelity comes from Citi. And she specifically said that there are still years before this regulatory clarity is fully implemented. And so I'm not here to inflate any expectations or, say this is going to happen sooner or later or whatever. I'm just here to show you guys the voices of the institutions, the people who actually matter in this space. These people aren't just like Twitter influencers, just like making opinions up off the top of their head and saying these things. No, these are insights from some of the largest industry leading experts. And so if you guys want access to this type of information on a consistent basis, maybe you've never seen any of these videos from Rippleswell, they can all be found organized inside our private CYPRX Discord in our crypto research section to give you guys the realest insights in the game. No overinflated hyper expectations. You guys now have accurate technical analysis levels to be paying attention to on XRP, levels we need to overcome before we get super excited of higher prices on XRP, which I am a firm believer of, guys, mind you. I hope that in the near future, we can see price push above $2.28. And then I will start to get excited of possibly a higher $3 level target on XRP in the days and weeks ahead. As always, many blessings to you guys. Be cognizant. I'll make sure to update you guys as price tags along. With that being said, do us a favor, smash the thumbs up button and subscribe. Hope to see you guys inside the private CYPRX community this year. Take advantage of all the knowledge and the information that our community provides, the software that we've developed for our private community members, the institutional and accurate research that we deliver on a consistent daily basis. Be mindful, be aware, and I'll see you guys in the next video breakdown.